All right, so back again for another deep dive.
Yeah.
And today's topic is one that's been kind of bugging me. It's about Europe.
Oh,
Everything's Europe's doing great, right? Big economy, good standard of living. People
yeah.
seem pretty happy over there.
Right.
But their economy is actually slowing down.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, what's going on?
Right.
Luckily, we found this great video essay that digs into it, so that's what we'll be looking at today. And just to give you a teaser, you ready for this? Europe is more productive in some ways than the U.S.
Huh.
But there's always a catch, right?
Yeah.
So let's get into it.
Yeah, for sure. I think the key thing here is it's not that Europe's doing badly, like they're not in a recession or anything. It's more that compared to the US, their growth is kind of lagging behind. And what's even more interesting is this isn't just a Europe thing. Developing economies around the world are also kind of falling behind the US in terms of growth.
So it's like, is the U.S. just some kind of economic unicorn? Or is something up with Europe?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Okay, so this video we're using, it breaks down the problem into 6 big categories, kind of like 6 lenses to look through. Innovation, immigration, industry, integration, interpretation, and energy.
Right, so each of these is going to give us a different perspective on what might be contributing to this slowdown.
Exactly. And we want to be clear, this isn't just about boring numbers and graphs, all right? This affects people. Real people. Like, it could impact you, even if you don't live in Europe.
Oh, absolutely. These economic trends, they have global implications.
For sure. All right, so let's start with immigration. Now, this is a hot topic everywhere, right? But in Europe, it's way more complicated than people think.
Yeah, a lot of folks assume that more immigration equals a stronger economy, but that's a massive oversimplification, especially in Europe.
So what's the deal with Europe and immigration?
Well, this video essay makes a really important point. See, the types of immigration Europe gets are different from, say, the US or Canada.
Different how?
Family reunification and asylum seekers, those make up a way bigger chunk of immigration to Europe. Work-based immigration, the kind that's usually tied to economic growth, it's actually a smaller portion.
So not all immigration is created equal when it comes to the economy.
Right. It's about skills. It's about, people coming to fill specific jobs and contribute in that way.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. Ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
Europe's actually losing highly educated workers. They're going to the U.S., Canada, elsewhere.
Yeah, the brain drain. It's a real problem.
It's like they're spending all this time and money educating people, and then poof, they're gone.
Exactly. And it's not just about losing numbers, right? It's about losing skills, expertise that Europe needs to stay competitive, especially in tech and research.
This makes me think about the long term. Like, if this keeps up, what happens? Does Europe fall further behind? Do they lose their edge in innovation?
It's definitely a concern. Attracting and keeping talented people, that's crucial for any economy that wants to thrive in the future, especially in this knowledge-based world we're living in.
Right. Now, thinking about work in general, it's kind of obvious that Europeans have a different vibe than, say, Americans.
Mm-hmm.
They work less. They seem to value that work-life balance thing.
Oh, yeah.
Is that part of the reason their economy is slowing down, or is there something else going on?
Well, it's true. Europeans often choose to work a bit less, prioritize their personal life. But the funny thing is, the labor force participation rate in Europe is actually quite high.
Really?
Yeah. The thing is, a lot of older Europeans are working longer than they maybe want to.
Why is that?
They can't afford to retire. So it's not that they're all about leisure over work. It's more like they're stuck.
Wow. So that whole work less, live more image, it's not the whole story, huh?
Nope, it's way more complicated than that. And this whole thing with older workers having to stay in the game, that can have its own consequences for the economy down the line.
Makes you think.
Yeah.
Right. If you're listening to this, imagine you're a skilled worker. You've got choices. Would you go for a higher salary, even if it meant giving up some of that European chill lifestyle?
Tough call. It really shows how, economic factors and personal values, they're all tangled up together.
No kidding. This whole thing reminds me of that deep dive we did on Iceland a while back.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about their geothermal energy, how it's like this huge advantage they've got. It made me realize access to cheap, clean energy, it's directly tied to how well a country does.
Absolutely. Richer countries, they tend to use more energy both for their citizens and their industries, and that's where Europe is running into a problem.
What do you mean?
Well, they were really dependent on Russia for energy, right?
Uh-huh.
Now they're trying to shift to renewables, which is great, but they're behind the US and China when it comes to renewable tech.
Ah, I see. So they're in this awkward spot.
Exactly.
And speaking of awkward spots, Remember when Volkswagen, the German car company, almost had to shut down factories in Germany?
Yeah, that was wild.
All because energy costs were going through the roof. If a giant like Volkswagen is feeling the squeeze, what does that say about the rest of European industry?
Yeah. It's a sign that this transition to clean energy, it's not going to be easy. Rising energy costs hit businesses hard,
Hmm.
especially energy-intensive ones. And that can lead to job losses, factory closures, and ultimately a weaker economy.
So we've talked immigration, we've talked energy,
Mm.
two pretty big factors in this whole Europe slowdown thing.
Mm.
But now let's get to innovation, right?
Yeah.
Europe, they've got this long history of invention, discovery. I mean, they basically invented modern science, right?
Yeah.
So what's happening now? Why are they falling behind?
It's a good question. And this video essay, it kind of points the finger at the US. They've created this whole innovation ecosystem, right? It attracts the best minds, it attracts investment, and it just keeps feeding itself.
Like a snowball effect.
Exactly. More innovation happens, the US becomes even more attractive for talented people, entrepreneurs. It's a cycle.
So Europe's missing out on that cycle.
It seems that way. The video points out a couple of reasons. First, there's the language barrier. For European companies to go global, it's tough. English is like the default language for business, for tech.
Mm.
US companies have a built-in advantage there.
Makes sense. If you got to translate everything, it slows you down, it adds costs. Plus, sometimes things get lost in translation, right?
Right.
Like imagine trying to explain a really subtle joke in another language.
Mhm.
It just doesn't hit the same.
Right. Nuance gets lost. And then there's the whole issue of EU regulations. Don't get me wrong, a lot of these regulations are good. They protect consumers. They try to keep things fair.
Yeah.
But sometimes those same regulations can make life hard for startups. It's harder for them to grow quickly, to compete with the big guys.
So it's like a trade-off. You want rules, but too many rules can stifle innovation.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. But here's another point the video brings up that I found interesting. Apparently, a lot of European entrepreneurs, they end up just copying US tech companies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that a sign that Europe's lacking creativity? Or is it like a smart strategy? You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's a good question. Like that old saying, good artists copy, great artists steal. Maybe the question is, are European entrepreneurs just copying, or are they stealing ideas and making them even better? You know, this whole conversation about innovation, about economic growth, it makes me wonder, is it really making our lives better?
Ooh, now that's a deep question. And the video actually pushes us to think about that. The US, they might have higher productivity, faster growth, but does that actually translate to a better quality of life for the average person?
I see what you mean. Europe might be behind in the pure numbers game, but they often do better when it comes to things like work-life balance, healthcare, social safety nets.
Right. The video emphasizes this point, that the US model, it might be good at creating wealth, but it comes with a cost. Longer hours, more stress, maybe even less security in the long run.
It's like we're on this treadmill, always chasing more. More money, more stuff, more growth. But is it worth it? Maybe Europe, with their focus on living a good life, maybe they've got a point.
It's a different model for sure, and it has its own pros and cons. The challenge for Europe is, how do they keep those social benefits, that high quality of life, while also dealing with this economic slowdown?
Sounds like a tough balancing act.
It is.
Yeah.
And it all comes back to those 6 factors we talked about. They're all connected.
Yep.
Like, how can Europe attract more skilled workers without messing up their social harmony? How can they go green without hurting their industries?
Big questions.
No kidding.
Wow, so we've really gone deep on this whole Europe thing. Brain drain, energy problems, trying to keep up with the U.S. and innovation. It's clear they've got some work to do. But honestly, what's been most interesting to me is how this has made us rethink what success even means. Like, is it just about the economy?
Right. It's easy to get caught up in those numbers, GDP, productivity.
Yeah.
But the way Europe prioritizes well-being, quality of life, it offers a whole different perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what's the point of a booming economy if people aren't actually happy?
Makes you think, doesn't it?
Big time.
Hmm.
I mean, we got to look beyond just the economic indicators, right? What about work-life balance, healthcare, a safety net if things go wrong? Those things matter.
They're huge. And that's traditionally where Europe has shined. They've built systems to support people, give them a sense of security. But like we've been saying, holding on to those benefits while fixing the economy, that's going to be tricky.
For sure. So where do they go from here? Can they boost innovation and attract investment without throwing away those social programs? Can they go green without hurting their industries? I mean, these are big decisions.
Million-euro questions, you could say. And there's no easy answers. It's going to take some serious planning, smart investments, and maybe some tough choices about what matters most.
Okay, so for our listeners who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this,
hmm
what are the key things to remember?
Well, first off, Europe slowdown. It's complicated. There's no magic bullet, no quick fix. It's going to take time and effort to get things back on track.
Not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Exactly. And the second thing is, Europe's kind of at a fork in the road right now. Do they try to play catch up with the US and pure economic growth? Or do they stick to their strengths? Even if that means slower growth overall, both options have upsides and downsides.
Yeah, whatever they choose, it'll have an impact on the whole world, not just Europe.
Definitely. And the last thing I'd say is this whole conversation, it's a reminder that we need to question what we think we know about success. It's not just about money, it's about well-being, it's about taking care of people and the planet.
It's like a wake-up call to
Everything.
rethink our priorities, right? We need a more balanced approach,
Yeah.
one that doesn't just look at profits, but also thinks about the social environmental costs.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Because in the end, the economy should serve the people, not the other way around.
Well said. All right, that wraps up our deep dive into Europe's economic situation. We hope this has given you some food for thought.
Keep those questions coming, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Thanks for listening.